Canto 52. Dhúmráksha's death. The Vánars saw the giant foe pour from the gate in gallant show, rejoiced with warriors, fierce delight, and shouted, longing for the fight. Near came the hosts, and nearer yet dire was the tumult as they met, as, serried line to line opposed, the Vánars and the giants closed. Fierce on the foe the Vánars rushed, and, wielding trees, the foremost crushed, but, feathered from the heron's wing, with eager flight from sounding string, against them shot with surest aim a ceaseless storm of arrows came, and, pierced in head and chest and side, full many a Vánar fell and died. They perished slain in fierce attacks with sword and pike and battle-axe, but myriads following undismayed their valor in the fight displayed. Unnumbered Vánars rent, and torn with shaft and spear to earth were borne, but crushed by branchy trees and blocks of jagged stone and shivered rocks, which the wild Vánars wielded well the bravest of the giants fell. Their trampled banners strewed the fields, and broken swords and spears and shields, and, crushed by blows which none might stay, cars, elephants, and riders lay. Dhúmráksha turned his furious eye, and saw his routed legions fly. Still dauntless, with terrific blows, he struck and slew his foremost foes. At every blow, at every thrust, he laid a Vánar in the dust. So fell they neath the sword and lance in battle's wild Gandharva, 961, dance, where clang of bow and clash of sword did duty for the silvery cord, and hoofs that rang and steeds that neighed loud concert for the dancers made. So fiercely from Dhúmráksha's bow his arrows rained in ceaseless flow, the Vánar legions turned and fled to all the winds discomfited. Hanuman saw the Vánars fly, he heaved a mighty rock on high. His keen eyes flashed with wrathful fire, and, rapid as the wind his sire, strong as the rushing tempests are, he hurled it at the advancing car. Swift through the air the missile sang. The giant from the chariot sprang, ere, crushed by that terrific blow, lay pole and wheel and flag and bow. Hanuman's eyes with fury blazed. A mountain's rocky peak he raised, poised it on high in act to throw, and rushed upon his giant foe. Dhúmráksha saw. He raised his mace and smote Hanuman on the face, who, maddened by the wound's keen pang, again upon his foeman sprang, and on the giant's head the rock descended with resistless shock. Crushed was each limb, a shapeless mass he lay upon the blood-stained grass. Canto 53. Vajradanshtra's sally. When Rav, a letter 1E47 in his palace, heard the mournful news, his wrath was stirred, and, gasping like a furious snake, to via J R a D a N S H letter 1E60 R a thus he spake. Go forth, my fiercest captain, lead the bravest of the giants' breed. Go forth, the sons of Raghu slay, and by their side Sugriva lay. He ceased, the chieftain bowed his head, and forth with gathered troops he sped. Cars, camels, steeds were well arrayed, and colored banners o'er them played. Rings decked his arms. About his waist the life-protecting mail was braced, and on the chieftain's forehead set glittered his cap and coronet. Borne on a bannered car that glowed with golden sheen the warrior rode, and footmen marched with spear and sword and bow and mace behind their lord. In pomp and pride of warlike state they sallied from the southern gate, but saw, as on their way they sped, dread signs around and overhead. For there were meteors falling fast, though not a cloud its shadow cast, and each ill-omened bird and beast, foreboding death, the fear increased, while many a giant slipped and reeled, falling before he reached the field. They met in mortal strife engaged, and long and fierce the battle raged. Spears, swords uplifted, gleamed and flashed, and many a chief to earth was dashed. A ceaseless storm of arrows rained, and limbs were pierced and blood-distained. Terrific was the sound that filled the air, and every heart was chilled, as hurtling o'er the giants flew the rocks and trees which Vánars threw. Fierce as a hungry lion when unwary deer approach his den, Angad, his eyes with fury red, waving a tree above his head, rushed with wild charge which none could stay where stood the giant's dense array. Like tall trees leveled by the blast before him fell the giants fast, and earth that streamed with blood was strown with warriors, steeds, and cars o'erthrown. Canto 54. Vajradanshtra's death. The giant leader fiercely rained his arrows, and the fight maintained. Each time the clanging cord, he drew his certain shaft a Vánar slew. Then, as the creatures he has made fly to the Lord of Life for aid, to Anged for protection, fled the Vanar hosts dispirited. Then raged the battle fiercer, yet when Anged and the giant met, 100,000 arrows, hot with flames of fire, the giant shot, and every shaft he deftly sent his foeman's body pierced and rent. From Anged's limbs ran floods of gore. A stately tree from earth he tore, which, maddened as his gashes bled, he hurled at his opponent's head. His bow the dauntless giant drew. To meet the tree swift arrows flew, checked the huge missiles' onward way, and harmless on the earth it lay. Awhile the Vanar chieftain gazed. Then from the earth a rock he raised rent from a thundersplit in height, and cast it with resistless might. The giant marked, and mace in hand, leapt from his chariot to the sand, ere the rough mass descending broke the seat, the wheel, the pole and yoke. Then Anged seized a shattered hill, whereon the trees were flowering still, and with full force the jagged peak fell crashing on the giant's cheek. He staggered, reeled and fell, the blood gushed from the giant in a flood. Reft of his might, each sense astray, while upon the sand he lay. But strength and wandering sense returned again his eyes, with fury burned, and with his mace upraised on high, he wounded Anged on the thigh. Then from his hand his mace he threw, and closer to his foeman drew. Then with their fists they fought, and smote on brow and cheek and chest and throat. Worn out with toil, their limbs bedewed with blood, the strife they still renewed, like Mercury and fiery Mars met in fierce battle mid the stars. Awhile the deadly fight was stayed. Each armed him with his trusty blade, whose sheath with tinkling bells supplied, and golden net adorned his side, and grasped his ponderous leather shield to fight till one should fall or yield. Unnumbered wounds they gave and took, their wearied bodies reeled and shook. At length upon the sand that drank streams of their blood the warriors sank, but as a serpent rears his head sore wounded by a peasant's tread, so Anged, fallen on his knees, yet gathered strength his sword to seize, and, severed by the glittering blade, the giant's head on earth was laid. Canto 59. Rávan's sally. They told him that the chief was killed, and Rav, a letter 1E47's breast with rage was filled. Then, fiercely moved by wrath and pride, thus to his lords the tyrant cried, "No longer, nobles, may we show this lofty scorn for such a foe by whom our bravest, with his train of steeds and elephants, is slain. Myself this day will take the field, and Raghu's sons their lives shall yield." High on the royal car, that glowed with glory from his face, he rode, and tambour shell and drum pealed out, and joyful was each giant's shout. A mighty host, with eyeballs red like flames of kindled fire, he led. He passed the city gate, and viewed, arrayed, the Vanar multitude, those wielding massy rocks, and these armed with the stems of upturned trees, and Rama with his eyes aglow with warlike ardor viewed the foe. And thus the brave Vibhish, a letter 1E47, best of weapon-wielding chiefs, addressed. What captain leads this bright array where lances gleam and banners play, and thousands armed with spear and sword await the bidding of their lord? "Seest thou, Vibhish, a letter 1E47 answered, one whose face is as the morning sun, preeminent for hugest frame. Accompany 962 is the giant's name. Behold that chieftain, chariot-born, whom Brahma's chosen gifts adorn. He wields a bow like Indra's own, a lion on his flag is shown, his eyes with baleful fire are lit. Tis Rav, a letter 1E47's son, tis Indrajit. There, brandishing in mighty hands his huge bow, Ayodhyá stands. And that proud warrior o'er whose head a moonbright canopy is spread, whose might, in many a battle tried, has tamed imperial Indra's pride, who wears a crown of burnished gold, is Lanka's lord the lofty-souled. He ceased, and Rama knew his foe and laid an arrow on his bow. Woe to the wretch, he cried, whom fate abandons to my deadly hate. He spoke, and firm by Lakshm, a letter 1E47's side, the giant to the fray defied. The lord of Lanka bade his train of warriors by the gates remain to guard the city from surprise by Rama's forest-born allies. Then, as some monster of the sea cleaves swift advancing billows, he charged with impetuous onset through the foe and cleft the host in two. Sugrava ran, the king to meet. A hill uprooted from its seat he hurled, with trees that graced the height against the rover of the night, but cleft with shafts that checked its way harmless upon the earth it lay. Then fiercer Rav, a letter 1E47's fury grew. An arrow from his side he drew, swift as a thunderbolt, aglow with fire, and launched it at the foe. Through flesh and bone away it found, and stretched Sugriva on the ground. Sush letter 1E47, and Nala saw him fall, Gavaksha, Gavya heard their call, and, poising hills, in act to fling they charged Amin the giant king. They charged, they hurled the hills in vain, he checked them with his arrowy rain, and every brave assailant felt the piercing wounds his missiles dealt. Then smitten by the shafts that came keen, fleet, and thick, with certain aim they fled to Rama, sure defense against the oppressor's violence. Then reverent palm to palm applied. Thus Kshm a letter 1E47 to his brother cried. To me, my lord, the task and trust to lay this giant in the dust. Go then, said Rama, bravely fight, beat down this rover of the night. But he, unmatched in bold emprise, fears not the Lord of earth and skies, keep on thy guard. With keenest eye thy moments of attack espy. Let hand and eye in due accord, protect thee with the bow and sword. Then Kshm, a letter 1E47 round his brother threw his mighty arms in honor due, bent lowly down his reverent head, and onward to the battle sped. Hanuman from afar beheld how Rav a letter 1E47's shafts the Vánars quelled. To meet the giant's car he ran, raised his right arm, and thus began. If Brahma's boon thy life has screened from Yaksha, god, Gandharva, fiend, with these contending fear no ill, but tremble at a Vanar still. With fury flashing from his eye the Lord of Lanka made reply. Strike, Vanar, strike. The fray begin, and hope eternal fame to win. This arm shall prove thee in the strife, and end thy glory and thy life. Remember, cried the wind god's son, remember all that I have done, my prowess, king, thou knowest well, shown in the fight when Aksha, 963 fell. With heavy hand the giant smote Hanuman on the chest and throat, who reeled and staggered to and fro, stunned for a moment by the blow. Till, mustering strength, his hand he reared and struck the foe whom Indra feared. His huge limbs bent beneath the shock, as mountains, in an earthquake, rock, and from the gods and sages pealed shouts of loud triumph as he reeled. But strength returning nerved his frame, his eyeballs flashed with fiercer flame. No living creature might resist that blow of his tremendous fist which fell upon Hanuman's flank, and to the ground the Vanar sank, no sign of life his body showed. And Rav a letter 1E47 in his chariot rode at Nila, and his arrowy rain fell on the captain and his train. Fierce Nila stayed his Vanar band, and, heaving with his single hand a mountain peak, with vigorous swing hurled the huge missile at the king. Hanuman life and strength regained, burned for the fight, and thus complained. Why, coward giant, didst thou flee and leave the doubtful fight with me? 7 mighty arrows keen and fleet the giant launched, the hill to meet, and all its force and fury stayed, the harmless mass on earth was laid. Enraged the Vanar chief beheld the mountain peak by force repelled, and rained upon the foe a shower of trees uptorn with branch and flower. Still his keen shafts, which pierced and rent each flying tree, the giant sent. Still was the Vanar doomed to feel the tempest of the winged steel. Then, smarting from that arrowy storm, the Vanar chief condensed his form, 964, and lightly leaping from the ground on Rav, a letter 1E47's standard footing found, then springing unimpeded down stood on his bow and golden crown. The Vanar's nimble, leaps amazed Ikshvaku's son, who stood and gazed. The giant, raging in his heart, laid on his bow a fiery dart, the Vanar on his flagstaff eyed, and thus in tones of fury cried, Well skilled in magic lore art thou, but will thine art avail thee now? See if thy magic will defend thy life against the dart I send. Thus Rav, a letter 1E47 spake, the giant king, and loosed the arrow from the string. It pierced with direst fury sped, the Vanar with its flaming head. His father's might, his power innate preserved him from the threatened fate. Upon his knees he fell, disdained with streams of blood, but life remained. Still Rav, a letter 1E47 for the battle burned. At Kshm, a letter 1E47 next his car he turned, and charged Amin with furious show, straining in mighty hands his bow. Come, Kshm, a letter 1E47 cried, assay the fight, leave foes unworthy of thy might. Thus Kshm, a letter 1E47 spoke, and Lanka's lord heard the dread thunder of the cord. And mad with burning rage and pride in hasty words like these replied, Joy, joy is mine, O Raghu's son, thy fate today thou canst not shun. Slain by mine arrows, thou shalt tread the gloomy pathway of the dead. Thus as he spoke his bow he drew, and 7 keen shafts at Lakshman, a letter 1E47 flew. But Raghu's son with surest aim cleft every arrow as it came. Thus with fleet shafts each warrior shot against his foe, and rested not. Then one choice weapon from his store, by Brahma's self bestowed of yore, fierce as the flames that end the world, the giant king at Lakshman, a letter 1E47 hurled. The hero fell, and racked with pain, scarce could his hand his bow retain. But sense and strength resumed their seat, and lightly springing to his feet, he struck with one tremendous stroke, and Rav, a letter 1E47's bow in splinters broke. From Lakshman, a letter 1E47's cord 3 arrows flew, and pierced the giant monarch through. Sore wounded Rav, a letter 1E47 closed, and round Ikshvaku's son his strong arms wound. With strength unrivaled, Brahma's gift, he strove from earth his foe to lift. Shall I, he cried, who overthrow Mount Meru and the Lord of Snow, and heaven and all who dwell therein, be foiled by one of Rama's kin? But though he heaved, and twalled, and strained, unmoved Ikshvaku's son remained. His frame by those huge arms compressed the giant's God-given force confessed, but conscious that himself was part of Vish letter 1E47u, he was firm in heart. The wind god's son the fight beheld, and rushed at Rav, a letter 1E47, rage impelled. Down crashed his mighty hand, the foe full in the chest received the blow. His eyes grew dim, his knees gave way, and senseless on the earth he lay. The wind god's son to Rama bore deep wounded Lakshman, a letter 1E47 stained with gore. He whom no foe might lift or bend was light as air to such a friend. The dart that Lakshman, a letter 1E47's side had cleft, untouched, the hero's body left, and flashing through the air afar resumed its place in Rav, a letter 1E47's car, and, waxing well though wounded sore, he felt the deadly pain no more. And Rav, a letter 1E47, though with deep wounds pained, slowly his sense and strength regained, and furious still and undismayed on bow and shaft his hand he laid. Then Hanuman to Rama cried, Ascend my back, great chief, and ride like Vish letter 1E47u born on Gru letter 1E0ds wing to battle with the giant king. So, burning for the dire attack, rode Rama on the Vánars' back, and with fierce accents loud and slow thus gave defiance to the foe, while his strained bowstring made a sound like thunder when it shakes the ground. Stay, monarch of the giants, stay, the penalty of sin to pay. Stay. Whither wilt thou fly, and how escape the death that waits thee now? No word the giant king returned, his eyes with flames of fury burned. His arm was stretched, his bow was bent, and swift his fiery shafts were sent. Red torrents from the Vánar flowed, then Rama near to Rav, a letter 1E47 strode, and with keen darts that never failed, the chariot of the king assailed. With surest aim his arrows flew, the driver and the steeds he slew. And shattered with the pointed steel car, flag, and pole and yoke and wheel. As Indra hurls his bolt to smite Mount Meru's heaven-ascending height, so Rama with a flaming dart struck Lanka's monarch near the heart, who reeled and fell beneath the blow, and from loose fingers dropped his bow. Bright as the sun, with crescent head from Rama's bow an arrow sped, and from his forehead, proud no more, cleft the bright coronet he wore. Then Rama stood by Rav, a letter 1E47's side, and to the conquered giant cried, Well hast thou fought, thine arm has slain strong heroes of the Vánar train. I will not strike or slay thee now, for weary, faint with fight art thou. To Lanka's town thy footsteps bend, and there the night securely spend. Tomorrow come with car and bow, and then my prowess shalt thou know. He ceased, the king in humbled pride rose from the earth and not replied. With wounded limbs and shattered crown, he sought again his royal town. Canto 60. Kumbhakarna roused. With humbled heart and broken pride through Lanka's gate the giant hied, crushed, like an elephant beneath a lion's spring and murderous teeth, or like a serpent, neath the wing and talons of the feathered king. Such was the giant's wild alarm at arrows shot by Rama's arm, shafts with red lightning round them curled, like Brahma's bolts that end the world. Supported on his golden throne, with failing eye and humbled tone, giants, he cried, the toil is vain, fruitless the penance and the pain, if I whom Indra owned his peer, secure from gods, a mortal fear. My soul remembers, now too late, Lord Brahma's words who spoke my fate. Tremble, proud giant, thus they ran, and dread thy death from slighted man. Secure from gods and demons live, and serpents, by the boon I give. Against their power thy life is charmed, but against man is still unarmed. This Rama is the man foretold by a N, a R, a letter 1E47Y, a S, 965, lips of old. Fear, R-A-V, a letter 1E47, basest of the base. For of mine own imperial race a prince in aftertime shall spring, and thee and thine to ruin bring. And Vedavati, 966, ere she died slain by my ruthless insult, cried, a scion of my royal line shall slay, vile wretch, both thee and thine. She in a later birth became King Janak's child, now Rama's dame. Nandisvara, 967, foretold this fate, and Yuma 968, when I moved her hate, and Rampa 969, and the lovely child of Varu letter 1E47 970, by my touch defiled. I know the fated hour is nigh, hence, captains, to your stations fly. Let warders on the rampart stand, place at each gate a watchful band, and, terror of immortal eyes, let mightiest Kumbh a K, a R letter 1E47 arise. He, slumbering, free from care and pain by Brahma's curse, for months has lain. But when Prahesta's death he hears, mine own defeat and doubts and fears, the chief will rise to smite the foe, and his unrivaled valor show. Then Raghu's royal sons, and all the Vánars neath his might will fall. The giant lords his hest obeyed, they left him, trembling and afraid, and from the royal palace strode to Kumbh a K, a R letter 1E47 a S vast abode. They carried garlands sweet and fresh, and reeking loads of blood and flesh. They reached the dwelling where he lay, a cave that reached a league each way, sweet with fair blooms of lovely scent, and bright with golden ornament. His breathings came so fierce and fast, scarce could the giants brook the blast. They found him on a golden bed, with his huge limbs at length outspread. They piled their heaps of venison near, fat buffaloes and boars and deer. With wreaths of flowers they fanned his face, and incense sweetened all the place. Each raised his mighty voice, as loud as thunders of an angry cloud, and conch their stirring summons gave that echoed through the giant's cave. Then on his breast they rained their blows, and high the wild commotion rose when cymbal vied with drum and horn, and war cries on the gale upborne. Through all the air loud discord spread, and struck with fear the birds fell dead. But still he slept and took his rest. Then dashed they on his shaggy chest clubs, maces, fragments of the rock he moved not once, nor felt the shock. The giants made one effort more with shell and drum, and shout and roar. Club, mallet, mace, in fury plied, rained blows upon his breast and side. And elephants were urged to aid, and camels groaned and horses neighed. They drenched him with 100 pails, they tore his ears with teeth and nails. They bound together many a mace, and beat him on the head and face, and elephants with ponderous tread stamped on his limbs and chest and head. The unusual weight his slumber broke. He started, shook his sides, and woke, and, heedless of the wounds and blows, yawning with thirst and hunger rose. His jaws like hell gaped fierce and wide, dire as the flame neath ocean's tide. Red as the sun on Meru's crest the giant's face his wrath expressed, and every burning breath he drew was like the blast that rushes through the mountain cedars. Up he raised his awful head with eyes that blazed like comets, dire as death in form, who threats the worlds with fire and storm. The giants pointed to their stores of buffaloes and deer and boars, and straight he gorged him with a flood of wine, with marrow, flesh, and blood. He ceased, the giants ventured near, and bent their lowly heads in fear. Then Kumbhakarna glared with eyes still heavy in their first surprise, still drowsy from his troubled rest, and thus the giant band addressed. How have ye dared my sleep to break? No trifling cause should bid me wake. Say, is all well? or tell the need that drives you with unruly speed to wake me. Mark the words I say, the king shall tremble in dismay. The fire be quenched, and Indra slain, ere ye shall break my rest in vain. Upaksha answered, Chieftain, here no god or fiend excites our fear. But men in arms our walls assail, we tremble lest their might prevail. For vengeful Rama vows to slay the foe who stole his queen away, and, matchless for his warlike deeds, a host of mighty Vánars leads. Ere now a monstrous Vanar came, laid Lanka waste with ruthless flame, and Aksha, Rav a letter 1E47's offspring, slew with all his warrior retinue. Our king who never trembled yet for heavenly hosts in battle met. At length, the general dread has shared, o'erthrown by Rama's arm and spared. He ceased, and Kumbhakar letter 1E47 spake. I will go forth and vengeance take, will tread their hosts beneath my feet, then triumph flushed our king will meet. Our giant bands shall eat their fill of Vánars, whom this arm shall kill. The prince's blood shall be my draught, the chieftains shall by you be quaffed. He spake, and with an eager stride that shook the earth, to Rav a letter 1E47 hied. Canto 61. The Vánars' alarm. The son of Raghu near the wall saw, proudly towering over all, the mighty giant stride along attended by the warrior throng, heard Kumbhakar letter 1E47, as heavy feet awake the echoes of the street, and, with the lust of battle fired, turned to Vibhish a letter 1E47, and inquired, Vibhish a letter 1E47, tell that chieftain's name who rears so high his mountain frame. With glittering helm and lion eyes, preeminent in might, and size above the rest of giant birth, he towers the standard of the earth, and all the Vánars when they see the mighty warrior turn and flee. In him, Vibhish a letter 1E47 answered, No Visrava's son, the immortal's foe, fierce Kumbhakar letter 1E47, mightier far than gods and fiends and giants are. He conquered Yama in the fight, and Indra trembling owned his might. His arm the gods and fiends subdued, Gandharvas and the serpent brood. The rest of his gigantic race are wondrous strong by God-giving grace, but nature at his birth to him gave matchless power and strength of limb. Scarce was he born, fierce monster, when he killed and ate 1,000 men. The trembling race of men, appalled, on Indra for protection called, and he, to save the suffering world, his bolt at Kumbhakar letter 1E47 hurled. So awful was the monster's yell that fear on all the nations fell. He, rushing on with furious roar, a tusk from huge Aravat tore, and dealt the gods so dire a blow that Indra reeling left his foe, and with the gods and mortals fled to Brahma's throne dispirited. O Brahma, thus the suppliants cried, some refuge for this woe provide. If thus his maw the giant sate, soon will the world be desolate. The self-existent calmed their woe, and spake in anger to their foe, As thou wast born, Pulistia's son, that worlds might weep by thee undone, thou like the dead henceforth shalt be, such is the curse I lay on thee. Senseless he lay, nor spoke nor stirred, such was the power of Brahma's word. But Rav a letter 1E47, troubled for his sake, thus to the self-existent spake. Who lops the tree his care has reared when golden fruit has first appeared? Not thus, O Brahma, deal with one descended from thine own dear son. 971, still thou, O Lord, thy word must keep, he may not die, but let him sleep. Yet fix a time for him to break the chains of slumber and awake. He ceased, and Brahma made reply. 6 months in slumber shall he lie, and then arising for a day shall cast the numbing bonds away. Now Rav a letter 1E47 in his doubt, and dread has roused the monster from his bed, who comes in this the hour of need on slaughtered Vánars' flesh to feed. Each Vanar, when his awestruck eyes behold the monstrous chieftain, flies. With hopeful words their minds deceive, and let our trembling hosts believe they see no giant, but displayed, a lifeless engine deftly made. Then Rama called to Nila, Haste, let troops near every gate be placed, and armed with fragments of the rock and trees, each lane and alley block. Thus Rama spoke, the chief obeyed, and swift the Vánars stood arrayed, as when the black clouds their battle form, the summit of a hill to storm. Canto 62. Ravan's request. Along bright Lanka's royal road the giant, roused from slumber, strode, while from the houses on his head a rain of fragrant flowers was shed. He reached the monarch's gate, whereon rich gems and golden fretwork shone. Through court and corridor that shook beneath his tread his way he took, and stood within the chamber where his brother sat in dark despair. But sudden, at the grateful sight, the monarch's eye again grew bright. He started up, forgot his fear, and drew his giant brother near. The younger pressed the elder's feet and paid the king observance meet, then cried, "O monarch, speak thy will, and let my care thy word fulfill. What sudden terror and dismay have burst the bonds in which I lay?" Fierce flashed the flame from Rav, a letter 1E47 SI, as thus in wrath he made reply. "Fair time, I ween, for sleep is this, to lull thy soul in tranquil bliss, unheeding, in oblivion drowned, the dangers that our lives surround. Brave Ráma, Dasaratha's son, a passage o'er the sea has won, and with the Vanar monarch's aid, round Lanka's walls his hosts arrayed. Though never in the deadly field, my Raksha's troops were known to yield. The bravest of the giant train have fallen by the Vánars slain. Hence comes my fear. O fierce and brave, go forth, our threatened Lanka save. Go forth, a dreadful vengeance take, for this, O chief, I bade thee wake. The gods and trembling fiends have felt the furious blows thine arm has dealt. Earth has no warrior, heaven has none to match thy might, Polysteia's son." Canto 63. Kumbhakarna's boast. Then Kumbhakar letter 1E47 laughed aloud and cried, "O monarch, once so proud, we warned thee, but thou wouldst not hear, and now the fruits of sin appear. We warned thee, I thy nobles all who loved thee, in thy council hall. Those sovereigns who with blinded eyes neglect the foe their hearts despise, soon, falling from their high estate, bring on themselves the stroke of fate. Accept at length thy life to save, the counsel sage Vibhish a letter 1E47 gave, the prudent counsel spurned before, and Sítá to her lord restore." 972. The monarch frowned, by passion moved, and thus in angry words reproved. "Wilt thou thine elder brother school, forgetful of the ancient rule that bids thee treat him as the sage who guides thee with the lore of age? Think on the dangers of the day, nor idly throw thy words away. If, led astray, by passion stirred, I in the pride of power have erred. If deeds of old were done amiss, no time for vain reproach is this. Up, brother, let thy loving care the errors of thy king repair." To calm his wrath, his soul to ease, the younger spake in words like these: "Yea, from our bosoms let us cast all idle sorrow for the past. Let grief and anger be repressed, again be firm and self-possessed. This day, O monarch, shalt thou see the Vanar legions turn and flee, and Ráma and his brother slain with their hearts, blood shall dye the plain. Yea, if the god who rules the dead, and Varu letter 1E47 their battalions led, if Indra with the storm gods came against me, and the lord of flame, still would I fight with all and slay thy banded foes, my king, today. If Raghu's son this day withstand the blow of mine uplifted hand, deep in his breast my darts shall sink, and torrents of his lifeblood drink. O fear not, in my promise trust, this arm shall lay him in the dust, shall leave the fierce Sugrava dyed with gore, and Lakshm a letter 1E47 by his side, and strike the great Hanuman down, the spoiler of our glorious town." 973. Canto 64. Mahadar's speech. He ceased, and when his lips were closed, Mahadar thus his reed opposed: "Why wilt thou shame thy noble birth and speak like one of little worth? Why boast thee thus in youthful pride, rejecting wisdom for thy guide? How will thy single arm oppose the victor of 1,000 foes, who proved in Janisthan his might, and slew the rovers of the night? The remnant of those legions, they who saw his power that fatal day, now in this leaguered city dread the mighty chief from whom they fled. And wouldst thou meet the lord of men, beard the great lion in his den, and, when thine eyes are open, break the slumber of a deadly snake? Who may an equal battle wage with him, so awful in his rage, fierce as the god of death whom none may vanquish, Dasaratha's son? But Rav a letter 1E47, shall the lady still refuse compliance with thy will? No, listen, king, to this design which soon shall make the captive thine. This day through Lanka's streets proclaim that 4 of us, 974, of highest fame with Kumbhak, a R letter 147, are at our head, we'll strike the son of Raghu dead. Forth to the battle will we go, and prove our prowess on the foe. Then, if our bold attempts succeed, no further plans thy hopes will need. But if in vain our warriors strive, and Raghu's son be left alive, we will return, and, wounded sore, our armor stained with gouts of gore, we'll show the shafts that rent each frame, keen arrows marked with Rama's name, and say we giants have devoured the princes whom our might o'erpoured. Then let the joyful tidings spread that Raghu's royal sons are dead. To all around thy pleasure show, gold, pearls, and precious robes bestow. Gay garlands round the portals twine, enjoy the banquet and the wine. Then go, the scornful lady seek, and woo her when her heart is weak. Rich robes and gold and gems display, and gently while her grief away. Then will she feel her hopeless state, widowed, forlorn, and desolate, know that on thee her bliss depends, far from her country and her friends. Then, her proud spirit overthrown, the lady will be all thine own. Canto 65. Kumbhakarna's speech. But haughty Kumbhak, a R letter 147, spurned his counsel, and to Rav, a letter 147 turned. Thy life from peril will I free, and slay the foe who threatens thee. A hero never vaunts in vain like bellowing clouds, devoid of rain, nor, monarch, be thine ear, inclined to counselors of slavish kind, who with mean arts their king mislead, and mar each gallant plan and deed. Oh, let not words like his beguile the glorious king of Lanka's isle. Thus scornful Kumbhak, a R letter 147 cried, and Rav, a letter 147 with a laugh replied. Mahadar fears and fain would shun the battle with Ikshvaku's son. Of all my giant warriors, who is strong as thou, and brave and true. Ride, conqueror, to the battle ride, and tame the foeman's senseless pride. Go forth like Yama to the field, and let thine arm thy trident wield. Scared by the lightning of thine eye the Vanar hosts will turn and fly, and Rama, when he sees thee near, with trembling heart will own his fear. The champion heard, and well content forth from the hall his footsteps bent. He grasped his spear, the foeman's dread, black iron all, both shaft and head, which, dyed in many a battle, bore great spots of slaughtered victims' gore. The king upon his neck had thrown the jeweled chain, which graced his own. And garlands of delicious, sent about his limbs for ornament. Around his arms gay bracelets clung, and pendants in his ears were hung. Adorned with gold, about his waist, his coat of mail was firmly braced, and like Nary, a letter 147, 975, or the god who rules the sky he proudly trod. Behind him went a mighty throng of giant warriors tall and strong, on elephants of noblest breeds. With cars, with camels, and with steeds, and, armed with spear and axe and sword, were fain to battle for their lord. 976. Canto 66. Kumbhakarna's sally. In pomp and pride of warlike state, the giant passed the city gate. He raised his voice. The hills, the shore of Lanka's sea, returned the roar. The Vánars saw the chief draw nigh, whom not the ruler of the sky, nor Yama, monarch of the dead, might vanquish, and affrighted fled. When royal Angad, Bali's son, saw the scared Vánars turn and run, undaunted still he kept his ground, and shouted as he gazed around. O Nala Nila, stay nor let your souls your generous worth forget. O Kumud and Gavaksha, why like base-born Vánars will ye fly? Turn, turn, nor shame your order thus, this giant is no match for us. They heard his voice. The flight was stayed again, for war they stood arrayed, and hurled upon the foe a shower of mountain peaks and trees in flower. Still on his limbs their missiles rained, unmoved, their blows he still sustained, and seemed unconscious of the stroke when rocks against his body broke. Fierce as the flame when woods are dry, he charged with fury in his eye. Like trees consumed with fervent heat, they fell beneath the giant's feet. Some o'er the ground, dyed red with gore, fled wild with terror to the shore, and, deeming that all hope was lost, ran to the bridge they erst had crossed. Some clomb the trees their lives to save, some sought the mountain and the cave, some hid them in the bosky dell, and there in death-like slumber fell. When Angad saw the chieftains fly, he called them with a mighty cry. Once more, O Vánars, charge once more, on to the battle as before. In all her compass earth has not, to hide you safe, one secret spot. What? Leave your arms. Each nobler dame will scorn her consort for the shame. This blot upon your names efface, and keep your valor from disgrace. Stay, chieftains, wherefore will ye run, a band of warriors scared by one? Scarce would they hear, they would not stay, and basely spoke in wild dismay. Have we not fought, and fought in vain, have we not seen our mightiest slain? The giant's matchless force we fear, and fly because our lives are dear. But Bali's son with gentle art dispelled their dread and cheered each heart. They turned and formed, and waited still obedient to the prince's will. Canto 67. Kumbhakarna's death. Thus from their flight the Vánars turned, and every heart for battle burned, determined on the spot to die or gain a warrior's meed on high. Again the Vánars stooped to seize their weapons, rocks and fallen trees. Again the deadly fight began, and fiercely at the giant ran. Unmoved the monster kept his place. He raised on high his awful mace, whirled the huge weapon round his head, and laid the foremost Vánars dead. 8,000 fell bedewed with gore, then sank and died 700 more. Then 30, 20, 10, or 8 at each fierce onset met their fate, and fast the fallen were devoured like snakes by G-A-R-U letter 10D speak orpord. Then Dwivid from the Vánar van, armed with an uptorn mountain, ran like a huge cloud when fierce winds blow, and charged Amming the mountain foe. With wondrous force the hill he threw, Kumbhakar letter 1047 as head it flew, and falling on his host afar crushed many a giant, steed and car. Rocks, trees, by fierce Hanuman sped, rained fast on Kumbhakar letter 1047 as head, whose spear each deadlier missile stopped, and harmless on the plain it dropped. Then with his furious eyes aglow the giant rushed upon the foe, where, with a woody hill upheaved, Hanuman's might his charge received. Through his vast frame, the giant felt the angry blow Hanuman dealt. He reeled a moment, sore distressed, then smote the Vánar on the breast, as when the war god's furious stroke through Cronch's hill a passage broke. 977, fierce was the blow, and deep and wide the rent. With crimson torrents dyed, Hanuman, maddened by the pain, roared like a cloud that brings the rain, and from each Raksha's throat rang out loud clamor and exultant shout. Then Nila hurled with mustard might the fragment of a mountain height, nor would the rock the foe have missed. But Kumbhakar letter 1047 raised his fist and smote so fiercely that the mass fell crushed to powder on the grass. 5 chieftains of the Vánar race, 978 charged Kumbhakar letter 1047 a face to face, and his huge frame they wildly beat with rocks and trees and hands and feet. Round Rishabh first the giant wound his arms and hurled him to the ground, where speechless, senseless, wounded sore, he lay his face besmeared with gore. Then Nila with his fist he slew, and Sarab with his knee o'erthrew, nor could Gavaksha's strength withstand the force of his terrific hand. At Gandhamadon's eager call rushed thousands to avenge their fall, nor ceased those Vánars to assail with knee and fist, and tooth and nail. Around his foes the giant threw his mighty arms, and nearer drew the captive subject to his will, then snatched them up and ate his fill. There was no respite then, no pause, fast gaped and closed his hell-like jaws. Yet, prisoned in that gloomy cave, some Vánars still their lives could save. Some through his nostrils found a way, some through his ears resought the day. Like Indra with his thunder, like the god of death in act to strike, the giant seized his ponderous spear, and charged the foe in swift career. Before his might the Vánars fell, nor could their hosts his charge repel. Then trembling, nor ashamed to run, they turned and fled to Raghu's son. When Bali's warrior son, 979, beheld their flight, his heart with fury swelled. He rushed with his terrific shout to meet the foe and stay the rout. He came, he hurled a mountain peak, and smote the giant on the cheek. His ponderous spear the giant threw, fierce was the cast, the aim was true, but Angad, trained in war and tried, saw ere it came and leapt aside. Then with his open hand, he smote the giant on the chest and throat. That blow the giant scarce sustained, but sense and strength were soon regained. With force which nothing might resist, he caught the Vanar by the wrist, whirled him, as if in pastime, round, and dashed him senseless on the ground. There low on earth his foe lay crushed. At King Sugriva next he rushed, who, waiting for the charge, stood still, and heaved on high a shattered hill. He looked on Kumbhakarna letter 1E47 died with streams of blood, and fiercely cried, "Great glory has thine arm achieved, and thousands of their lives bereaved. Now leave awhile thy meaner foes, and brook the hill Sugriva throws." He spoke and hurled the mass he held. The giant's chest the stroke repelled, then on the Vanars fell despair, and Raksha's clamor filled the air. The giant raised his arm, and fast came the tremendous 980 spear he cast. Hanuman caught it as it flew, and napped it on his knee in two. The giant saw the broken spear. His clouded eye confessed his fear, yet at Sugriva's head he sent a peak from Lanka's mountain rent. The rushing mass no might could stay. Sugriva fell and senseless lay. The giant stooped his foe to seize, and bore him thence, as bears the breeze a cloud in autumn through the sky. He heard the sad immortals sigh, and shouts of triumph long and loud went up from all the Rakshas crowd. Through Lanka's gate the giant passed, holding his struggling captive fast, while from each terrace, house, and tower fell on his haughty head a shower of fragrant scent and flowery rain, blossoms and leaves and scattered grain. 981. By slow degrees the Vanars, Lord felt life and sense and strength restored. He heard the giant's joyful boast, he thought upon his Vanar host. His teeth and feet he fiercely plied, and bit and rent the giant's side, who, mad with pain and smeared with gore, hurled to the ground the load he bore. Regardless of a storm of blows, swift to the sky the Vanar rose, then lightly like a flying ball high overleapt the city wall. And joyous for deliverance, one regained the side of Raghu's son. And Kumbhakarna letter 1E47, mad with hate and fury, sallied from the gate. The carnage of the foe renewed, and filled his maw with gory food. Slaying with headlong frenzy blind, both Vanar foes and giant kind. Nor would Sumitra's valiant son, 982, the might of Kumbhakarna letter 1E47 shun, who through his harness felt the sting of keen shafts loosened from the string. His heart confessed the warrior's power, and bleeding from the ceaseless shower that smote him on the chest and side, with words like these the giant cried, well fought, Sumitra's son, eternal glory hast thou won, for thou in desperate fight hast met the victor never conquered yet, whom, borne on huge Aravat's back, An Indra trembles to attack. Go, son of Queen Sumitra, go, thy valor and thy strength I know. Now all my hope and earnest will is Rama in the fight to kill. Let him beneath my weapons fall, and I will meet and conquer all. The chieftain, of Sumitra born, made answer as he laughed in scorn, Yea, thou hast won a victor's fame from trembling gods and Indra's shame. There waits thee now a mightier foe, whose prowess thou hast yet to know. There, famous in 100 lands, Rama the son of Raghu stands. Straight at the king the giant sped, and earth was shaken at his tread. His bow the hero grasped and strained, and deadly shafts in torrents rained. As Kumbhakarna letter 1E47, felt each stroke from his huge mouth burst fire and smoke. His hands were loosed in mortal pain, and dropped his weapons on the plain. Though reft of spear and sword, and mace no terror changed his haughty face. With heavy hands he rained his blows, and smote to death 1,000 foes. Where'er the furious monster strode wild down his limbs, the red blood flowed like torrents down a mountain's side. Vanars and bears and giants died. High o'er his head a rocky swung, and the huge mass at Rama flung. But Rama's arrows bright, as flames shattered the mountain as it came. Then Raghu's son, his eyes aglow with burning anger, charged the foe, and as his bow he strained and tried, with fearful clang the cord replied. Wroth at the bowstring's threatening clang, to meet his foe the giant sprang. High towering with enormous frame huge, as a wood-crowned hill he came. But Rama firm and self-possessed in words like these the foe addressed. Draw near, O Raksha's lord, draw near, nor turn thee from the fight in fear. Thou meetest Rama face to face, destroyer of the giant race. Come fight and thou shalt feel this hour, laid low in death, thy conqueror's power. He ceased, And mad with wrath and pride the giant champion thus replied, "Come thou to me, and thou shalt find a foeman of a different kind. No Karva, no Vireta, thou hast met a mightier warrior now. The strength of Kumbhakarna, a R letter 1E47 of fear. And dread the iron mace I rear this mace in days of yore, subdued the gods and Danav multitude. Prove, lion of Ikshvaku's line, thy power upon these limbs of mine. Then after trial shalt thou bleed, and with thy flesh my hunger feed." He ceased, and Rama, undismayed, upon his cord those arrows laid which pierced the stately sal trees through, and Bali king of Vánars slew. They flew, they smote, but smote in vain those mighty limbs that felt no pain. Then Rama sent, with surest aim, the dart that bore the wind god's name. The missile from the giant tore his huge arm, and the mace it bore, which crushed the Vánars where it fell. And dire was Kumbhak, a R letter 1E47 a SL. The giant seized a tree, and then rushed madly at the Lord of Men. Another dart, Lord Indra's own, to meet his furious onset thrown, his left arm from the shoulder lopped, and like a mountain peak it dropped. Then from the bow of Rama sped 2 arrows, each with crescent head and, winged with might which naught could stay, they cut the giant's legs away. They fell, and awful was the sound as those vast columns shook the ground, and sky, and sea, and hill, and cave in echoing roars their answer gave. Then from his side the hero drew a dart that like the tempest flew. No deadlier shaft has ever flown than that which Indra called his own, nor could the giant's mail-armed neck the fury of the missile check. Through skin and flesh and bone it smote, and rent asunder head and throat. Down with the sound of thunder rolled the head adorned with rings of gold, and crushed to pieces in its fall a gate, a tower, a massive wall. Hurled to the sea, the body fell terrific was the ocean's swell, nor could swift fin and nimble leap save the crushed creatures of the deep. Thus he who plagued in impious pride the gods and Brahmins fought and died. Glad were the hosts of heaven, and long the air re-echoed with their song. 983. Canto 68. Ravan's Lament. They ran to Rav, a letter 1E47 in his hall, and told him of his brother's fall. Fierce as the god who rules the dead, upon the rooted foe he fed, and, victor for a while, at length fell slain by Rama's matchless strength. Now like a mighty hill in size his mangled trunk extended lies, and where he fell, a bleeding mass, blocks Lanka's gate that none may pass. The monarch heard. His strength gave way, and fainting on the ground he lay. Grieved at the giant's mournful tale, long, shrill was Ayodhya's wail, and treacherous in sorrow bowed his triple head, and wept aloud. Mahadar, Mahaparsva shed hot tears, and mourned their brother dead. At length his wandering sense restored, in loud lament cried Lanka's lord. "Ah, chief, for might and valor famed, whose arm the haughty foeman tamed, forsaking me, thy friends and all, why hast thou fled to Yama's hall? Why hast thou fled to taste no more the slaughtered foeman's flesh and gore? Ah me, my life is done today, my better arm is lopped away. Whereon in danger I relied, and fearless gods and fiends defied. How could a shaft from Rama's bow the matchless giant overthrow, whose iron frame so strong of yore the crushing bolt of Indra bore? This day the gods and sages meet, and triumph at their foes' defeat. This day the Vānar chiefs will boast, and with new ardor fired, their host in fiercer onset will assail our city, and the ramparts scale. What care I for a monarch's name, for empire, or the Maithil dame? What joy can power and riches give, or life that I should care to live, unless this arm immortal fray the slayer of my brother slay? For me, of Kumbhak, a R letter 1E47 a reft, death is the only solace left, and I will seek, o'erwhelmed with woes, the realm to which my brother goes. Ami ill-minded, not to take his counsel when Vibhish, a letter 1E47 spake, when he this evil day foretold my foolish heart was overbold. I drove my sage adviser hence, and reap the fruits of mine offense. Canto 69. Narantak's death. Pierced to the soul by sorrow's sting, thus wailed the evil-hearted king. Then treacherous stood forth and cried, "Yea, father, he has fought and died our bravest, and the loss is sore, but rouse thee and lament no more. Hast thou not still thy coat of mail, thy bow and shafts which never fail. 1,000 asses draw thy car, which roars like thunder heard afar. Thy valor and thy warrior skill, thy God-given strength, are left thee still. Unarmed, thy matchless might subdued the gods and Dana of multitude. Armed with thy glorious weapons, how shall Raghu's son oppose thee now? Or, sire, within thy palace stay, and I myself will sweep away thy foes, like G-A-R-U letter 1E0D, when he makes a banquet of the writhing snakes. Soon Raghu's son shall press the plain, as Narak, 984, fell by Vish letter 1E47U slain, or Sambar, 985, in rebellious pride who met the king of gods, 986, and died. The monarch heard, his courage grew, and life and spirit came anew. Devantak and Narantak heard, and their fierce souls with joy were stirred, and Ayodhyá, 987, burned to fight, and heard the summons with delight while from the rest loud rang the cry, I too will fight, and I, and I. The joyous king his sons embraced, with gold and chains and jewels graced, and sent them forth with stirring speech of benison and praise to each. Forth from the gate, the princes sped, and ranged for war the troops they led. The Vanar legions charged anew, and trees and rocks for missiles flew. They saw Narantak's mighty form, borne on a steed that mocked the storm. To check his charge in vain they strove, straight through their host his way he clove, as springs a dolphin through the tide. And countless Vánars fell and died, and mangled limbs and corpses lay to mark the chief's ensanguined way. Sugriva saw them fall or fly when fierce Narantak's steed was nigh, and marked the giant where he sped o'er heaps of dying or of dead. He bade the royal Anged face that bravest chief of giant race. As springs the sun from clouds dispersed, so Anged from the Vánars burst. No weapon for the fight he bore save nails and teeth, and sought no more. Leave, giant chieftain, thus he spoke, leave foes unworthy of thy stroke, and bend against a nobler heart the terrors of thy deadly dart. Narantak heard the words he spake, fast breathing, like an angry snake, with bloody teeth his lips he pressed and hurled his dart at Anged's breast. True was the aim and fierce the stroke, yet on his breast the missile broke. Then Anged at the giant flew, and with a blow his courser slew. The fierce hand crushed through flesh and bone, and steed and rider fell o'erthrown. Narantak's eyes with fury blazed. His heavy hand on high he raised and struck in savage wrath the head of Bali's son, who reeled and bled, fainted a moment and no more. Then stronger, fiercer than before smote with that fist which naught could stay, and crushed to death the giant lay. Canto 70. The death of Treacherous. Then raged the Rakshas chiefs, and all burned to avenge Narantak's fall. Devantak raised his club on high, and rushed at Anged with a cry. Behind came Treacherous, and near Mahadar charged with levelled spear. There Anged stood to fight with three. High o'er his head he waved a tree, and at Devantak, swift and true as Indra's flaming bolt, it flew. But cut by giant shafts in twain, with minished force it flew in vain. A shower of trees and blocks of stone from Anged's hand was fiercely thrown, but well his club Devantak plied and turned each rock and tree aside. Nor yet by three such foes assailed, the heart of Anged sank or quailed. He slew the mighty beast that bore Mahadar. From his head he tore a bleeding tusk, and blow on blow fell fiercely on his Rakshas foe. The giant reeled, but strength regained, and furious strokes on Anged rained, who, wounded by the storm of blows, sank on his knees, but swiftly rose. Then Treacherous, as up he sprang, drew his great bow with awful clang, and fixed 3 arrows from his sheath full in the forehead of the chief. Hanuman saw, nor long delayed to speed with Nila to his aid, who at the three-faced giant sent a peak from Lanka's mountain rent. But Treacherous with certain aim shot rapid arrows as it came, and shivered by their force it broke, and fell to earth with flash and smoke. Then as the wind god's son came nigh, Devantak reared his mace on high. Hanuman smote him on the head, and stretched the monstrous giant dead. Fierce Treacherous with fury strained his bow, and showers of arrows rained that smote on Nila's side and chest. He sank a moment, sore distressed, but quickly gathered strength to seize a mountain with its crown of trees. Crushed by the hill, disdained with gore, Mahadar fell to rise no more. Then Treacherous raised high his spear which chilled the trembling foe with fear, and, like a flashing meteor, through the air at Hanuman it flew. The Vánars shunned the threatened stroke, and with strong hands the weapon broke. The giant drew his glittering blade. Dire was the wound the weapon made deep in the Vánar's ample chest, who, for a moment sore oppressed, raised his broad hand, regaining might, and struck the rover of the night. Fierce was the blow. With one wild yell low on the earth the monster fell. Hanuman seized his fallen sword, which served no more its senseless lord, and from the monster triple-necked, smote his huge heads with crowns bedecked. Then Mahaparsva burned with ire, fierce flashed his eyes with vengeful fire. A moment on the dead he gazed, then his black mace aloft was raised, and down the mass of iron came that struck and shook the Vánar's frame. Hanuman's chest was well-nigh crushed, and from his mouth red torrents gushed, yet served one instant to restore his spirit. From the foe he tore his awful mace, and smote, and laid the giant in the dust dismayed. Crushed were his jaws and teeth and eyes. Breathless and still he lay as lies a summit from a mountain rent by him who rules the firmament. Canto 71. Ayodhya's death. But Ayodhya's wrath grew high to see his noblest kinsman die. He, fiercest of the giant race, presuming still on Brahma's grace, proud tamer of the immortals' pride, whose power and might with Indra's vied, for blood and vengeful carnage burned, and on the foe his fury turned. High on a car that flashed and glowed bright, as 1,000 suns he rode. Around his princely brows was set a rich bejeweled coronet. Gold pendants in his ears he wore. He strained and tried the bow he bore, and ever, as a shaft he aimed, his name and royal race proclaimed. Scarce might the Vánars brook to hear his clanging bow and voice of fear. To Raghu's elder son they fled, their sure defense in woe and dread. Then Rama bent his eyes afar, and saw the giant in his car fast, following the flying crowd and roaring like a rainy cloud. He, with the lust of battle fired, turned to Vibhish a letter 1E47 and inquired, "Say, who is this, of mountain size, this archer with the lion eyes?" His car, which strikes our host with awe 1,000 eager coursers draw. Surrounded by the flashing spears which line his car, the chief appears like some huge cloud when lightnings play about it on a stormy day. And the great bow he joys to hold whose bended back is bright with gold, as Indra's bow makes glad the skies, that best of chariots glorifies. Oh, see the sun-like splendor flung from the great flag above him hung, where, blazoned with refulgent lines, Rahu 988, the dreadful dragon shines. Full 30 quivers near his side, his car with shafts is well supplied, and flashing like the light of stars gleam his 2 mighty scimitars. Say, best of giants, who is he before whose face the Vánars flee? Thus Rama spake. Vibhish a letter 1E47 eyed the giant's chief, and thus replied, "This Rama, this is Rav a letter 1E47's son, high fame his youthful might has won. He, best of warriors, bows his ear the wisdom of the wise to hear. Supreme is he mid those who know the mastery of sword and bow. Unrivaled in the bold attack on elephants or coursers' back, he knows, beside each subtler art, to win the foe, to bribe or part. On him the giant hosts rely, and fear no ill when he is nigh. This peerless chieftain bears the name of Ayodhya huge of frame, whom Daniamalini of yore to Rav a letter 1E47 lord of Lanka bore. Roused by his bowstring's awful clang, to meet their foes the Vánars sprang. Armed with tall trees from Lanka's wood, and rocks and mountain peaks they stood. The giant's arrows gold bedecked, the storm of hurtling missiles checked, and ever on his foeman poured fierce tempest from his clanging cord, nor could the Vánar chief sustain his shafts, intolerable rain. They fled. The victor gained the place where stood the lord of Raghu's race, and cried with voice of thunder, "Lo, borne on my car, with shaft and bow, I, champion of the giants, scorn to fight with weaklings humbly born. Come forth your bravest, if he dare, and fight with one who will not spare." Forth sprang Sumitra's noble child, 989, and strained his ready bow, and smiled, and giants trembled as the clang through heaven and earth reechoing rang. The giant to his string applied a pointed shaft, and proudly cried, "Turn, turn, Sumitra's son, and fly, for terrible as death am I." Fly, nor that youthful form oppose, untrained in war to warriors' blows. What? Wilt thou waste thy childish breath, and wake the dormant fire of death? Cast down, rash boy, that useless bow, preserve thy life uninjured go. He ceased, and stirred by wrath and pride Sumitra's noble son replied, By warlike deed, not words alone, the valor of the brave is shown. Cease with vain boasts my scorn to move, and with thine arm thy prowess prove. Borne on thy car, with sword and bow, with all thine arms thy valor show. Fight, and my deadly shafts this day low in the dust thy head shall lay, and, rushing fast in ceaseless flood, shall rend thy flesh and drink thy blood. His giant foe no answer made, but on his string an arrow laid. He raised his arm, the cord he drew. At LKSHM, a letter 1E47S breast the arrow flew. Sumitra's son, his foeman's dread, shot a fleet shaft with crescent head, which cleft that arrow pointed well, and harmless to the earth it fell. A shower of shafts from LKSHM, a letter 1E47S bow, fell fast and furious on the foe, who quailed not as the missiles smote, with idle force his iron coat. Then came the friendly wind god near, and whispered thus in LKSHM, a letter 1E47S ear. Such shafts as these in vain assail thy foe's impenetrable mail. A more tremendous missile try, or never may the giant die. Employ the mighty spell, and aim the weapon known by Brahma's name. He ceased. Sumitra's son obeyed, on his great bow the shaft was laid, and with a roar like thunder, true as Indra's flashing bolt, it flew. The giant poured his shafts like rain to check its course, but all in vain. With spear and mace and sword, he tried to turn the fiery dart aside. Winged with a force which naught could check, it smote the monster in the neck, and, sundered from his shoulders, rolled to earth his head and helm of gold. Canto 72. Rávan's speech. The giants bent, in rage and grief, their eyes upon the fallen chief. Then flying wild with fear and pale, to Rav, a letter 1E47 bore the mournful tale. He heard how Ayodhyá died, then turned him to his lords and cried, Where are they now, my bravest, where wise to consult and prompt to dare? Where is Dhúmráksha, skilled to wield all weapons in the battlefield? Accompany and Prahesta's might, and Kumbhakarna letter 1E47 a bold in fight. These and many Rakshas more, each master of the arms he bore, who every foe in fight o'erthrew, the victors none could e'er subdue, have perished by the might of one, the vengeful arm of Raghu's son. In vain I cast mine eyes around, no match for Rama here is found, no chief to stand before that bow whose deadly shafts have caused our woe. Now, warriors, to your stations hence, provide ye for the wall's defense, and be the Asoka garden, where the lady lies, your special care. Be every lane and passage barred, set at each gate a chosen guard. And with your troops, where danger calls, be ready to defend the walls. Each movement of the Vánars mark, observe them when the skies grow dark, be ready in the dead of night, and ere the morning bring the light. Taught by our loss, we may not scorn these legions of the forest-born. He ceased, the Rakshas' lords obeyed, each at his post his troops arrayed, and, torn with pangs that pierced him through, the monarch from the hall withdrew. Canto 73. Indrajit's victory. But Indrajit the fierce and bold with words like these his sire consoled. Dismiss, O king, thy grief and dread, and be not thus disquieted. Against this numbing sorrow strive, for Indrajit is yet alive, and none in battle may withstand the fury of his strong right hand. This day, O sire, thine eyes shall see the sons of Raghu slain by me. He ceased, he bade the king farewell, clear, mid the roar of drum and shell, the clash of sword and harness rang as to his car the warrior sprang. Close followed by his Rakshas train through, Lanka's gate he reached the plain. Then down he leapt, and bade a band of giants by the chariot stand. Then with due rites, as rules require, did worship to the Lord of Fire. The sacred oil, as texts ordain, with wreaths of scented flowers and grain, within the flame in order due, that mightiest of the giants threw. There on the ground were spear and blade, and arrowy leaves and fuel laid, an iron ladle deep and wide, and robes with sanguine colors dyed. Beside him stood a sable goat. The giant seized it by the throat, and straight from the consuming flame auspicious signs of victory came. For swiftly, curling to the right, The fire leapt up with willing light undimmed by smoky cloud, and, red like gold, upon the offering fed. They brought him, while the flame yet glowed, the dart by Brahma's grace bestowed, and all the arms he wielded well were charmed with text and holy spell. Then fiercer for the fight he burned, and at the foe his chariot turned, while all his followers lifting high their maces charged with furious cry. Dire, yet more dire the battle grew, as rocks and trees and arrows flew. The giant shot his shafts like rain, and Vánars fell in myriads slain. Sugriva, Angad, Nila felt the wounds his hurtling arrows dealt. His shafts the blood of Gaya drank, Hanuman reeled and Manda sank. Bright as the glances of the sun came the swift darts they could not shun. Caught in the arrowy nets he wove, in vain the sons of Raghu strove, and Rama, by the darts oppressed, his brother chieftain thus addressed. See, first this giant warrior sends destruction, mid our Vanar friends, and now his arrows thick and fast their binding net around us cast. To Brahma's grace the chieftain owes the matchless power, and mighty shows, and mortal strength in vain contends with him whom Brahma's self befriends. Then let us still with dauntless hearts endure this storm of pelting darts. Soon must we sink bereaved of sense, and then the victor, hurrying hence, will seek his father in his hall and tell him of his foeman's fall. He ceased. Orpared by shaft and spell the sons of Raghu reeled and fell. The Rakshas on their bodies gazed and, mid the shouts his followers raised, sped back to Lanka to relate in Rav, a letter 1E47's hall the prince's fate. Canto 74. The medicinal herbs. The shades of falling night concealed the carnage of the battlefield, which, bearing each a blazing brand, Hanuman and Vibhish a letter 1E47 scanned, moving with slow and anxious tread among the dying and the dead. Sad was the scene of slaughter shown, where the torch's light was thrown. Here mountain forms of Vánars lay, whose heads and limbs were lopped away, arms, legs and fingers strewed the ground, and severed heads lay thick around. The earth was moist with sanguine streams, and sighs were heard, and groans and screams. There lay Sugriva still and cold, there Angad, once so brave and bold. There Jambavan his might reposed, there Vegadarsi's eyes were closed, there in the dust was Nala's pride, and Dwivid lay by Manda's side. Where'er they looked the ensanguined plain was strewn with myriads of the slain. 990, they sought with keenly searching eyes King Jambavan supremely wise. His strength had failed by slow decay, and pierced with countless shafts he lay. They saw and hastened to his side, and thus the sage Vibhish a letter 1E47 cried, Thee, monarch of the bears, we seek, speak if thou yet art living, speak. Slow came the aged chief's reply, scarce could he say with many a sigh. Torn with keen shafts which pierce each limb, my strength is gone, my sight is dim, yet though I scarce can raise mine eyes, thy voice, O chief, I recognize. Oh, while these ears can hear thee say, has Hanuman survived this day? Why ask? Vibhish a letter 1E47 cried, for one of lower rank, the wind god's son. Hast thou forgotten, first in place, the princely chief of Raghu's race? Can King Sugriva claim no care, and Angad, his imperial heir? Yea, dearer than my noblest friends, is he on whom our hope depends. For if the wind god's son survive, all we though dead are yet alive. But if his precious life be fled though living still, we are but dead, he is our hope and sure relief. Thus slowly spoke the aged chief, then to his side Hanuman came, and with low reverence named his name. Cheered by the face, he longed to view the wounded chieftain lived anew. Go forth, he cried, O strong and brave, and in their woe the Vánars save. No might but thine, supremely great, may help us in our lost estate. The trembling bears and Vánars cheer, calm their sad hearts, dispel their fear. Save Raghu's noble sons, and heal the deep wounds of the winged steel. High o'er the waters of the sea, to far Himalaya's summits flee. Kailasa there wilt thou behold, and Rishab with his peaks of gold. Between them see a mountain rise whose splendor will enchant thine eyes. His sides are clothed above, below, with all the rarest herbs that grow. Upon that mountain's lofty crest 4 plants, of sovereign powers possessed, spring from the soil, and flashing their shed radiance through the neighboring air. One draws the shaft, one brings again the breath of life to warm the slain, one heals each wound, One gives anew to faded cheeks their wonted hue. Fly, chieftain, to that mountain's brow and bring those herbs to save us now. Hanuman heard, and springing through the air like VISH letter 1E47 US discus, 991, flew. The sea was past. Beneath him, gay with bright-winged birds, the mountains lay, and brook and lake and lonely glen, and fertile lands with toiling men. On he sped. Before him rose the mansion of perennial snows. There soared the glorious peaks, as fair as white clouds in the summer air. Here, bursting from the leafy shade, in thunder leapt the wild cascade. He looked on many a pure retreat dear to the gods and sages' feet, the spot where Brahma dwells apart, the place whence Rudra launched his dart. 992 VISH letter 1E47 US high seat and Indra's home, and slopes where Yama's servants roam. There was Kuvera's bright abode there, Brahma's mystic weapon glowed. There was the noble hill whereon those herbs with wondrous luster shone, and, ravished by the glorious sight, Hanuman rested on the height. He, moving down the glittering peak, the healing herbs began to seek, but when he thought to seize the prize, they hid them from his eager eyes. Then to the hill in wrath he spake, "Mine arm this day shall vengeance take if thou wilt feel no pity, none, in this great need of Raghu's son." He ceased. His mighty arms he bent, and from the trembling mountain rent his huge head with the life it bore, snakes, elephants, and golden ore. O'er hill and plain and watery waste his rapid way again he traced. And mid the wondering Vánars laid his burthen through the air conveyed. The wondrous herbs, delightful, sent to all the host new vigor lent. Free from all darts and wounds and pain, the sons of Raghu lived again, and dead and dying Vánars healed, rose vigorous from the battlefield. Canto 75. The night attack. Sugriva spake in words like these, "Now, Vanar lords, the occasion seize. For now, of sons and brothers reft, to Rav a letter 1E47 little hope is left. And if our host his gates assail, his weak defense will surely fail." At dead of night, the Vanar bands rushed on with torches in their hands. Scared by the coming of the host, each giant warder left his post. Where'er the Vanar legions came their way was marked with hostile flame that spread in fury to devour palace and temple, gate and tower. Down came the walls and porches, down came stately piles that graced the town. In many a house the fire was red, on sandalwood and aloe fed. And scorching flames in billows rolled o'er diamonds and pearls and gold. On cloth of wool, on silk brocade, on linen robes their fury preyed. Wheels, poles, and yokes were burned, and all the coursers' harness in the stall, and elephants and chariots' gear, the sword, the buckler, and the spear. Scared by the crash of falling beams, mid lamentations, groans, and screams, forth rushed the giants through the flames, and with them dragged bewildered dames each, with o'erwhelming terror wild, still clasping to her breast a child. The swift fire from a cloud of smoke through many a gilded lattice broke, and, melting pearl and coral, rose o'er balconies and porticos. The startled crane and peacock screamed as with strange light the courtyard gleamed, and fierce unusual glare was thrown on shrinking wood and heated stone. From burning stall and stable freed rushed frantic elephant and steed, and goaded by the driving blaze fled wildly through the crowded ways. As earth with fervent heat will glow when comes her final overthrow, from gate to gate, from court to spire proud Lanka was one blaze of fire, and every headland, rock and bay shone bright 100 leagues away. Forth, blinded by the heat and flame, ran countless giants huge of frame, and, mustering for fierce attack, the Vánars charged to drive them back, while shout and scream and roar and cry raychowed through the earth and sky. There Rama stood with strength renewed, and ever, as the foe he viewed, shaking the distant regions rang his mighty bow's tremendous clang. Then through the gates Nikumbha hied, and Kumbha by his brother's side sent forth, the bravest and the best, to battle by the king's behest. There fought the chiefs in open field, and Angad fell and Dwivid reeled. Sugriva saw, by rage impelled he crushed the bow which Kumbha held. About his foe Sugriva wound his arms, and, heaving from the ground the giant hurled him o'er the bank, and deep beneath the sea he sank. Like Mandar hill with furious swell up, leapt the waters where he fell. Again he rose. He sprang to land and raised on high his threatening hand, Full on Sugriva's chest it came and shook the Vánar's massy frame, but on the wounded bone he broke his wrist. So furious was the stroke. With force that naught could stay or check, Sugriva smote him 'neath the neck. The fierce blow crashed through flesh and bone, and Kumbha lay in death o'erthrown. Nikumbha saw his brother die, and red with fury flashed his eye. He dashed with mighty sway and swing his axe against the Vánar king, but shattered on that living rock, it split in fragments at the shock. Sugriva, rising to the blow, raised his huge hand and smote his foe. And in the dust the giant lay, gasping in blood his soul away. Canto 93. Rávan's Lament. They sought the king, a mournful train, and cried, "My lord, thy son is slain." By Lakshman, a letter 1E47's hand, before these eyes, the warrior fell no more to rise. No time is this for vain regret. Thy hero son a hero met, and he whose might in battle pressed Lord Indra and the gods confessed, whose power was stranger to defeat, has gained in heaven a blissful seat. The monarch heard the mournful tale, his heart was faint, his cheek was pale, his fleeting sense at length regained, in trembling tones he thus complained. Ah me, my son, my pride, the boast and glory of the giant host. Could Lakshman, a letter 1E47's puny, might defeat the foe whom Indra feared to meet. Could not thy deadly arrows split proud Mandar's peaks, O Indrajit, and the destroyer's self destroy? And wast thou conquered by a boy? I will not weep. Thy noble deed has blessed thee with immortal meed gained by each hero in the skies who fighting for his sovereign dies. Now fearless of all meaner foes, the guardian gods, 993 will taste repose. But earth to me, with hill and plain, is desolate, for thou art slain. Ah, whither hast thou fled, and left thy mother, Lanka, me bereft? Left pride and state and wives behind, and lordship over all thy kind. I fondly hoped thy hand should pay due honors on my dying day, and couldst thou, O beloved, flee and leave thy funeral rites to me. Life has no comfort left me, none, O Indrajit my son, my son. Thus wailed he broken by his woes, but swift the thought of vengeance rose. In awful wrath his teeth he gnashed, and from his eyes red lightning flashed. Hot from his mouth came fire and smoke, as thus the king in fury spoke. Through many 1,000 years of yore the penance and the pain I bore, and by fierce torment well sustained the highest grace of Brahma gained. His plighted word my life assured, from gods of heaven and fiends secured. He armed my limbs with burnished mail, whose luster turns the sunbeams pale. In battle-proof, gainst heavenly bands with thunder in their threatening hands. Armed in this mail myself will go with Brahma's gift my deadly bow, and cleaving through the foes my way, the slayers of my son will slay. Then, by his grief to frenzy wrought, the captive in the grove he sought. Swift through the shady path he sped, earth trembled at his furious tread. Fierce were his eyes, his monstrous hand held drawn for death his glittering brand. There weeping stood the Maythil dame, she shuddered as the giant came. Near drew the rover of the night and raised his sword in act to smite, but by his nobler heart impelled, one Raksha's lord his arm withheld. Wilt thou, great monarch, thus he cried, wilt thou, to heavenly gods allied, blot for all time thy glorious fame, the slayer of a gentle dame? What? Shall a woman's blood be spilt to stain thee with eternal guilt, thee deep in all the Vedas lore? Far be the thought forevermore. Ah, look, and let her lovely face this fury from thy bosom chase. He ceased, the prudent counsel pleased the monarch, and his wrath appeased, then to his council hall in haste the giant lord his steps retraced. Canto 96. Rávan's Sally. The groans and cries of dames who wailed the ears of Lanka's lord assailed, for from each house and home was sent the voice of weeping and lament. In troubled thought his head he bowed, then fiercely loosing on the crowd of nobles near his throne he broke the silence, and in fury spoke. This day my deadly shafts shall fly, and Raghu's sons shall surely die. This day shall countless Vánars bleed, and dogs and kites and vultures feed. Go, bid them swift my car prepare, bring the great bow I long to bear, and let my host with sword and shield and spear be ready for the field. From street to street the captains passed, and Raksha's warriors gathered fast. With spear and sword to pierce and strike, and axe and club and mace and pike. Canto 100. Rávan in the field. The plain with bleeding limbs was spread, and heaps of dying and of dead. His mighty bow still Rama strained, and shafts upon the giants rained. Still Anged and Sugriva, wrought to fury, for the Vánars fought. Crushed with huge rocks through chest and side Mahadar, Mahaparsva died, and Virupaksha stained with gore dropped on the plain to rise no more. When Rav a letter 147 saw the three o'erthrown, he cried aloud in furious tone, Urge, urge the car, my charioteer, the haughty Vánars' death is near. This very day shall end our griefs for leaguered town and slaughtered chiefs. Rama, the tree whose lovely fruit is Sítá, shall this arm uproot, whose branches with protecting shade are Vánar lords who lend him aid. Thus cried the king. The welkin rang as forth the eager coursers sprang, and earth beneath the chariot shook with flowery grove and hill and brook. Fast rained his shafts. Where'er he sped the conquered Vánars fell or fled, on rolled the car in swift career till Raghu's noble sons were near. Then Rama looked upon the foe and strained and tried his sounding bow, till earth and all the region rang re-echoing to the awful clang. His bow the younger chieftain bent, and shaft on shaft at Rav a letter 147 sent. He shot, but Rav a letter 147 little recked, each arrow with his own he checked, and headless, baffled of its aim, to earth the harmless missile came. And Lakshman a letter 147 stayed his arm o'erpoured by the thick darts the giant showered. Fierce waxed the fight and fiercer yet, for Rav a letter 147 now and Rama met, and each on other poured amine the tempest of his arrowy rain. While all the sky above was dark with missiles speeding to their mark like clouds, with flashing lightning twined about them, hurried by the wind. Not fiercer was the wondrous fight when Vritra fell by Indra's might. All arts of war each foeman knew, and trained alike, his bowstring drew. Red-eyed with fury Lanka's king pressed his huge fingers on the string, and fixed in Rama's brows a flight of arrows winged with matchless flight. Still Raghu's son endured, and bore that crown of shafts though wounded sore. O'er a dire dart, a spell he spoke with mystic power to aid the stroke. In vain upon the foe, it smote rebounding from the steel-proof coat. The giant armed his bow anew, and wondrous weapons hissed and flew terrific, deadly, swift of flight, beaked like the vulture and the kite, or bearing heads of fearful make of lion, tiger, wolf, and snake. 995, then Rama, troubled by the storm of flying darts in every form shot by an arm that naught could tire, launched at the foe his dart of fire, which, sacred to the Lord of Flame, burnt and consumed where'er it came. And many a blazing shaft, beside the hero, to his string applied. With fiery course of dazzling hue swift to the mark each missile flew, some flashing like a shooting star, some as the tongues of lightning are, one like a brilliant plant, one in splendor like the morning sun. Where'er the shafts of Rama burned, the giant's darts were foiled and turned. Far into space his weapons fled, but as they flew struck thousands dead. Canto 101. Lakshman's fall. When Rav a letter 147 saw his darts repelled, with double rage his bosom swelled. He summoned, wroth but undismayed, a mightier charm to lend its aid. And fierce as fire before the blast, a storm of missiles thick and fast, spear, pike and javelin, mace and brand, came hurtling from the giant's hand. But mightier still, the arms employed by Raghu's son their force destroyed, and every dart fell dulled and spent by powers the bards of heaven had lent. With his huge mace Vibhish, a letter 147 slew the steeds that Rav a letter 147's chariot drew. Then Rav a letter 147 hurled in deadly ire a ponderous spear that flashed like fire, but Rama's arrows checked its way, and harmless on the earth it lay. The giant seized a mightier spear, which Death himself would shun with fear. Vibhish, a letter 147 with the stroke had died, but Lakshman, a letter 147's hand his bowstring plied, and flying arrows thick as hail smote fiercely on the giant's mail. Then Rav a letter 147 turned his aim aside. On Lakshman, a letter 147 looked and fiercely cried, Thou again my wrath hast braved, and from his death Vibhish, a letter 147 saved. Now in his stead this spear receive, whose deadly point thy heart shall cleave. He ceased, he hurled the mortal dart by Maya forged with magic art. The spear with all his fury flung swift, flickering like a serpent's tongue, adorned with many a tinkling bell, smote Lakshman a letter 1E47, and the hero fell. When Rama saw, he heaved a sigh, a tear one moment dimmed his eye. But tender grief was soon repressed, and thoughts of vengeance filled his breast. The air around him flashed and gleamed as from his bow the arrows streamed, and Lanka's lord, the foeman's dread, o'erwhelmed with terror turned and fled. Canto 102. Lakshman healed. But Rama, pride of Raghu's race, gazed tenderly on Lakshman a letter 1E47's face, and, as the sight his spirit broke, turned to Sushe letter 1E47 and sadly spoke, "Where is my power and valor? How shall I have heart for battle now, when dead before my weeping eyes my brother, noblest Lakshman a letter 1E47, lies? My tears in blinding torrents flow, my hand unnerved has dropped my bow. The pangs of woe have blanched my cheek, my heart is sick, my strength is weak. Ah me, my brother! Ah, that I by Lakshman a letter 1E47's side might sink and die. Life, war and conquest, all are vain if Lakshman a letter 1E47 lies in battle slain. Why will those eyes my glances shun? Hast thou no word of answer? None. Ah, is thy noble spirit flown, and gone to other worlds alone? Couldst thou not let thy brother seek those worlds with thee? Oh speak, oh speak! Rise up once more, my brother, rise, look on me with thy loving eyes. Were not thy steps beside me still in gloomy wood, on breezy hill? Did not thy gentle care assuage thy brother's grief and fitful rage? Didst thou not all his troubles share, his guide and comfort in despair? As Rama, vanquished, wept and sighed, the Vanar chieftain thus replied, "Great prince, unmanly thoughts dismiss, nor yield thy soul to grief like this. In vain those burning tears are shed. Our glory Lakshman a letter 1E47 is not dead. Death on his brow no mark has set, where beauty's luster lingers yet. Clear is the skin, and tender hues of lotus flowers his palms suffuse. O Rama, cheer thy trembling heart, not thus do life and body part. Now, Hanuman, to thee I speak, hie hence to tall Mahadevas, 996, peak where herbs of sovereign virtue grow, which life and health and strength bestow. Bring thou the leaves to balm his pain, and Lakshman a letter 1E47 shall be well again." He ceased, the wind god's son obeyed, swift through the clouds his way he made. He reached the hill, nor stayed to find the wondrous herbs of healing kind. From its broad base the mount he tore with all the shrubs and trees it bore, sped through the clouds again, and showed to wise Sushe letter 1E47 his woody load. 997, Sushe letter 1E47 in wonder viewed the hill, and culled the sovereign salve of ill. Soon as the healing herb he found, the fragrant leaves he crushed and ground. Then over Lakshman a letter 1E47's face he bent, who, healed and strengthened by the scent of that blessed herb divinely sweet, rose fresh and lusty on his feet. Canto 103. Indra's car. Then Raghu's son forgot his woe. Again he grasped his fallen bow, and hurled at Lanka's lord Amin the tempest of his arrowy rain. Drawn by the steeds his lords had brought, again the giant turned and fought, and drove his glittering chariot, nigh, as springs the day god through the sky. Then, as his sounding bow he bent, like thunderbolts his shafts were sent, as when dark clouds in rain time shed fierce torrents on a mountain's head. High on his car the giant rode, on foot the son of Raghu strode. The gods from their celestial height, indignant, saw the unequal fight. Then he whom heavenly hosts revere, Lord Indra, called his charioteer. "Haste, Matali," he cried, "descend, to Raghu's son my chariot lend. With cheering words the chief address, and all the gods thy deed will bless." He bowed, he brought the glorious car whose tinkling bells were heard afar, fair as the sun of morning, bright with gold and pearl and lazulite. He yoked the steeds of tawny hue, that swifter than the tempest flew. Then down the slope of heaven he hied, and stayed the car by Rama's side. "Ascend, O chief," he humbly cried, "the chariot which the gods provide. The mighty bow of Indra say, sent by the gods who favor thee. Behold this coat of glittering mail, and spear and shafts which never fail. Cheered by the grace, the immortals showed the chieftain on the chariot road. Then, as the car-borne warriors met, the awful fight raged fiercer yet. Each shaft that Rav, a letter 1E47 shot, became a serpent red with kindled flame, and round the limbs of Rama hung with fiery jaws and quivering tongue. But every serpent fled dismayed when Raghu's valiant son displayed the weapon of the feathered king, 998, and loosed his arrows from the string. But Rav, a letter 1E47, armed his bow anew, and showers of shafts at Rama flew, while the fierce king in swift career smote with a dart the charioteer. An arrow shot by Rav, a letter 1E47's hand, laid the proud banner on the sand, and Indra's steeds of heavenly strain fell by the iron tempest slain. On gods and spirits of the air fell terror, trembling and despair. The sea's white billows mounted high with froth and foam to drench the sky. The sun by lurid clouds was veiled, the friendly lights of heaven were paled, and, fiercely gleaming, fiery Mars opposed the beams of gentler stars. Then Rama's eyes with fury blazed, as Indra's heavenly spear he raised. Loud rang the bells, the glistering head bright flashes through the region shed. Down came the spear in swift descent, the giant's lance was crushed and bent. Then Rav, a letter 1E47's horses brave, and fleet fell dead beneath his arrowy sleet. Fierce on his foeman Rama pressed, and gored with shafts his mighty breast. And spouting streams of crimson, dyed the weary giant's limbs and side. Canto 106. Glory to the sun. They're faint and bleeding fast. Apart stood Rav, a letter 1E47 raging in his heart. Then, moved with ruth for Rama's sake, Ayodhyá, 999, came and gently spake. Bend, Rama, bend thy heart and ear the everlasting truth to hear, which all thy hopes through life will bless and crown thine arms with full success. The rising sun with golden rays, light of the worlds, adore and praise. The universal King, the Lord by hosts of heaven and fiends adored. He tempers all with soft control. He is the gods' diviner soul, and gods above and fiends below, and men to him their safety owe. He Brahma, Vish letter 1E47 Siva, he each person of the glorious three is every god whose praise we tell, the King of heaven, 1000 the Lord of hell. 1001 each god revered from times of old, the Lord of war, 1002 the King of gold. 1003, Mahendra, time and death is he, the moon, the ruler of the sea. 1004 he hears our praise in every form. The mains, 1005, gods who ride the storm, 1006, the Visvins, 1007 Manu, 1008 they who stand round Indra, 1009, and the Satyas, 1010 band he is the air and life and fire, the universal source and sire. He brings the seasons at his call, creator, light and nurse of all. His heavenly course he joys to run, maker of day, the golden sun. The steeds that whirl his car are 1011, the flaming steeds that flash through heaven. Lord of the sky, the conqueror parts the clouds of night with glistering darts. He, master of the Vedas, lore commands the clouds' collected store. He is the river's surest friend. He bids the rains and they descend. Stars, planets, constellations own their monarch of the golden throne. Lord of 12 forms, 1012, to thee I bow, most glorious King of heaven art thou. O Rama, he who pays a right due worship to the Lord of light shall never fall oppressed by ill, but find a stay and comfort still. Adore with all thy heart and mind this God of gods, to him resigned, and thou his saving power shalt know victorious o'er thy giant foe. Canto 108. The battle. He spoke and vanished. Rama raised his eyes with reverence meet, and praised the glorious day God full in view, then armed him for the fight anew. Urged onward by his charioteer, the giant's foaming steeds came near. And furious was the battle's din, where each resolved to die or win. The Rakshas' host and Vānar bands stood with their weapons in their hands, and watched in terror and dismay the fortune of the awful fray. The giant chief with rage inflamed his darts at Rama's pennon aimed, but when they touched the chariot made by heavenly hands, their force was stayed. Then Rama's breast with fury swelled, he strained the mighty bow he held, and straight at Rav a letter 1E47's banner flew an arrow as the string he drew, a deadly arrow swift of flight, like some huge snake ablaze with light, whose fury none might e'er repel, and, split in twain, the standard fell. At Rama's steed's sharp arrows, hot with flames of fire, the giant shot. Unmoved the heavenly steeds, sustained the furious shower the warrior rained, as though soft lotus tendrils smote each haughty crest and glossy coat. Then volleyed swift by magic art tree, mountain peak and spear and dart, trident and pike and club and mace flew hurtling straight at Rama's face. But Rama with his steeds and car escaped the storm which fell afar where the strange missiles, as they rushed to earth, 1,000 Vánars crushed. Canto 109. The battle. With wondrous power and might and skill the giant fought with Rama still. Each at his foe his chariot drove, and still for death or victory strove. The warriors' steeds together dashed, and pole with pole reechoing clashed. Then Rama launching dart on dart made Rav, a letter 1E47's coursers swerve and start. Nor was the lord of Lanka slow to rain his arrows on the foe, who showed, by fiery points assailed, no trace of pain, nor shook nor quailed. Dense clouds of arrows Rama shot with that strong arm which rested not, and spear and mace and club and brand fell in dire rain from Rav, a letter 1E47's hand. The storm of missiles fiercely cast stirred up the oceans with its blast, and serpent gods and fiends who dwell below were troubled by the swell. The earth with hill and plain and brook and grove and garden reeled and shook. The very sun grew cold and pale, and horror stilled the rising gale. God and Gandharva, sage and saint cried out, with grief and terror faint, "O may the Prince of Raghu's line give peace to Brahmins and to kine, and, rescuing the worlds, o'erthrow the giant king our awful foe." Then to his deadly string, the pride of Raghu's race a shaft applied. Sharp as a serpent's venomed fang, straight to its mark the arrow sprang, and from the giant's body shred with trenchant steel the monstrous head. There might the triple world behold that severed head adorned with gold. But when all eyes were bent to view, swift in its stead another grew. Again the shaft was pointed well, again the head divided fell, but still as each to earth was cast another head succeeded fast. 100, bright with fiery flame, fell low before the victor's aim, yet Rav a letter 1E47 by no sign betrayed that death was near or strength decayed. The doubtful fight he still maintained, and on the foe his missiles rained. In air, on earth, on plain, on hill, with awful might he battled still, and through the hours of night and day the conflict knew no pause or stay. Canto 110. Ravan's death. Then Matali to Rama cried, "Let other arms the day decide. Why wilt thou strive with useless toil, and see his might thy efforts foil? Launch at the foe thy dart whose fire was kindled by the Almighty Sire." He ceased, and Raghu's son obeyed. Upon his string the hero laid an arrow, like a snake that hissed, whose fiery flight had never missed. The arrow Saint Agastya gave, and blessed the chieftain's life. To save that dart the eternal Father made the monarch of the gods to aid. By Brahma's self on him, bestowed when forth to fight Lord Indra rode. 'Twas feathered with the rushing wind, the glowing sun and fire combined to the keen point their splendor lent. The shaft, ethereal element, by Meru's hill and Mandar, pride of mountains, had its weight supplied. He laid it on the twisted cord, he turned the point at Lanka's lord. And swift the limb-dividing dart pierced the huge chest and cleft the heart, and dead he fell upon the plain like Vritra, by the thunderer slain. The Rakha's host, when Rav a letter 1E47 fell, sent forth a wild terrific yell, then turned and fled, all hope resigned, through Lanka's gates, nor looked behind. His voice each joyous Vanar raised, and Rama, conquering Rama, praised. Soft from celestial minstrels came the sound of music and acclaim. Soft, fresh, and cool, a rising breeze brought odors from the heavenly trees, and ravishing the sight and smell a wondrous rain of blossoms fell, and voices breathed round Raghu's son. Champion of gods, well done, well done. Canto 111. Vibhishan's Lament. Vibhis, a letter 1E47 saw his brother slain, nor could his heart its woe contain. O'er the dead king he sadly bent and mourned him with a loud lament. O hero, bold and brave, he cried, skilled in all arms, in battle tried. Spoiled of thy crown, with limbs outspread, why wilt thou press thy gory bed? Why slumber on the earth's cold breast, when sumptuous couches wooed a rest? Ah me, my brother overbold, thine is the fate my heart foretold. But love and pride forbade to hear the friend who blamed thy wild career. Fallen is the sun who gave us light, our lordly moon is veiled in night. Our beacon fire is dead, and cold 100 waves have o'er it rolled. What could his light and fire avail against Lord Rama's arrowy hail? Woe for the giant's royal tree, whose stately height was fair to see. His buds were deeds of kingly grace, his bloom the sons who decked his race. With rifled bloom and mangled bough the royal tree lies prostrate now. Nay, idly mourn not, Rama cried, the warrior king has nobly died. Intrepid hero, firm through all, so fell he as the brave should fall, and ill beseems it chiefs like us to weep for those who perish thus. Be firm, thy causeless grief restrain, and pay the dues that yet remain. Again Vibhish a letter 1E47 sadly spoke. His was the hero arm that broke embattled gods, and Indra's might, unconquered ere today in fight. He rushed against thee, fought and fell, as ocean when his waters swell, hurling his might against a rock, falls spent and shattered by the shock. Woe for our king's untimely end, the generous lord the trusty friend, our sure defense when fear arose, a dreaded scourge to stubborn foes. Oh, let the king thy hand has slain the honors of the dead obtain. Then Rama answered, hatred dies when low in dust the foeman lies. Now triumph bids the conflict cease, and knits us in the bonds of peace. Let funeral rites be duly paid, and be it mine thy toil to aid. Canto 112. The Raksha's dames. High rose the universal wail that mourned the monarch's death, and, pale with crushing woe, her hair unbound, her eyes in floods of sorrow drowned, forth from the inner chambers came with trembling feet each royal dame. Heedless of those who bade them stay, they reached the field where Rav a letter 1E47 lay, there falling by their husband's side. Ah, king! Ah, dearest lord, they cried. Like creepers shattered by the storm, they threw them on his mangled form. One to his bleeding bosom crept, and lifted up her voice and wept. About his feet one mourner clung, around his neck another hung, one on the giant's severed head. Her pearly tears in torrents shed fast as the drops the summer shower pours down upon the lotus flower. Ah, he whose arm in anger reared the king of gods and Yama feared, while panic struck their heavenly train, lies prostrate in the battle slain. Thy haughty heart thou wouldst not bend, nor listen to each wiser friend. Ah, had the dame, as they implored, been yielded to her injured lord, we had not mourned this day thy fall, and happy had it been for all. Then Rama and thy friends content in blissful peace their days had spent. Thine injured brother had not fled, nor giant chiefs and Vánars bled. Yet for these woes we will not blame thy fancy for the Maithil dame, fate, ruthless fate, whom none may bend has urged thee to thy hapless end. Canto 113. Mandodari's Lament. While thus they wept, supreme in place, the loveliest for form and face, Mandodari drew near alone, looked on her lord and made her moan. Ah, monarch, Indra feared to stand and fight before thy conquering hand. From thy dread spear the immortals ran, and art thou murdered by a man. Ah, 'twas no child of earth, I know, that smote thee with that mortal blow. 'Twas Death himself in Rama's shape that slew thee, Death whom none escape. Or was it he who rules the skies who met thee, clothed in man's disguise? Ah no, my lord, not Indra, he in battle ne'er could look on thee. One only God thy match I deem. 'Twas Vish letter 1E47 US self, the Lord supreme, whose days through ceaseless time extend and ne'er began and ne'er shall end, he with the discus, shell, and mace, brought ruin on the giant race. Girt by the gods of heaven, arrayed like Vánár hosts his strength to aid, he Rama's shape and arms assumed, and slew the king whom fate had doomed. In Janisthan, when Kara died with giant legions by his side, no mortal was the unconquered foe in Rama's form who struck the blow. When Hanuman the Vanar came and burnt thy town with hostile flame, I counseled peace in anxious fear. I counseled, but thou wouldst not hear. Thy fancy for the foreign dame has brought thee death and endless shame. Why should thy foolish fancy roam? Hadst thou not wives as fair at home? In beauty, form and grace could she, dear lord, surpass or rival me. Now will the days of Sítá glide in tranquil joy by Rama's side, and I, Ami, around me raves a sea of woe with whelming waves. With thee in days of old I trod each spot, beloved by nymph and god, I stood with thee in proud delight on Mandar's side and Mero's height. With thee, my lord, enchanted strayed in Chaitarathas. 1013, lovely shade, and viewed each fairest scene afar transported in thy radiant car. But source of every joy wast thou, and all my bliss is ended now. Then Rama to Vibhish, a letter 1E47 cried, whate'er the ritual bids, provide. Obsequial honors duly pay, and these sad mourners grief allay. Vibhish, a letter 1E47 answered, wise and true, for duty's changeless law he knew. Nay, one who scorned all sacred vows and dared to touch another's spouse, fell tyrant of the human race, with funeral rites I may not grace. Him Raghu's royal son, the best of those who love the law, addressed. False was the rover of the night, he loved the wrong and scorned the right. Yet for the fallen warrior plead the dauntless heart, the valorous deed. Let him who ne'er had brooked defeat, the chief whom Indra feared to meet, the ever-conquering lord, obtain the honors that should grace the slain. Vibhish, a letter 1E47 bade his friends prepare the funeral rites with thoughtful care. Himself the royal palace sought whence sacred fire was quickly brought, with sandalwood and precious scents, and pearl and coral ornaments. Wise Brahmins, while the tears that flowed down their wan cheeks their sorrow sowed, upon a golden litter laid the corpse in finest ropes arrayed. Thereon were flowers and pennons hung, and loud the monarch's praise was sung. Then was the golden litter raised, while holy fire in order blazed. And first in place Vibhish, a letter 1E47 led the slow procession of the dead. Behind, their cheeks with tears bedewed, came sad the widowed multitude. Where, raised as Brahmins ordered, stood piled sandal logs and scented wood, the body of the king was set high on a deerskin coverlet. Then duly to the monarchs, shade the offerings for the dead they paid, and southward on the eastern side, an altar formed and fire supplied. Then on the shoulder of the dead, the oil and clotted milk were shed. All rites were done as rules ordain, the sacrificial goat was slain. Next on the corpse were perfumes thrown, and many a flowery wreath was strown. And with Vibhish, a letter 1E47's ready aid rich vesture, o'er the king was laid. Then while the tears their cheeks bedewed parched grain upon the dead they strewed, last, to the wood, as rules require. Vibhish, a letter 1E47 set the kindling fire. Then having bathed, as texts ordained to Lanka went the morning train. Vibhish, a letter 1E47, when his task was done, stood by the side of Raghu's son. And Rama, freed from every foe, unstrung at last his deadly bow, and laid the glittering shafts aside, and mail by Indra's love supplied. Canto 114. Vibhishan consecrated. Joy reigned in heaven, where every eye had seen the Lord of Lanka die. In cars whose sheen surpassed the sun's triumphant rode the radiant ones, and Rav, a letter 1E47's death, by every tongue, and Rama's glorious deeds were sung. They praised the Vánars true and brave, the counsel wise Sugriva gave. The deeds of Hanuman they told, the valiant chief supremely bold, the strong ally, the faithful friend, and Sita's truth which naught could bend. To Matali, whom Indra sent, his head the son of Raghu bent, and he with fiery steeds who clove the clouds again to Swarga drove. Round King Sugriva brave and true his arms in rapture Rama threw, looked on the host with joy and pride. And thus to noble Lakshman, a letter 1E47 cried. Now let king-making drops be shed, dear brother, on Vibhish, a letter 1E47's head for truth and friendship nobly shown, and make him lord of Rav, a letter 1E47's throne. This longing of his heart he told, and Lakshman, a letter 1E47, took an urn of gold, and bade the wind-fleet Vánars bring sea water for the giant's king. The brimming urn was swiftly brought. Then on a throne superbly wrought Vibhish, a letter 1E47 sat, the giant's lord, and o'er his brows the drops were poured. As Raghu's son, the right beheld his loving heart with rapture swelled, but tenderer thoughts within him woke, and thus to Hanuman he spoke. Go to my queen. This message gives say LKSHM, a letter 1E47 and Sugriva live. The death of Lanka's monarch tell, and bid her joy, for all is well. Canto 115. Sita's joy. The Vanar chieftain bowed his head, within the walls of Lanka sped, leave from the new-made king obtained, and Sita's lovely garden gained. Beneath a tree the queen he found, where Raksha's warders watched around. Her pallid cheek, her tangled hair, her raiment showed her deep despair. Near and more near the envoy came, and gently hailed the weeping dame. She started up in sweet surprise, and sudden joy illumed her eyes. For well the Vanar's voice she knew, and hope reviving sprang and grew. Fair queen, he said, our task is done, the foe is slain and Lanka won. Triumphant mid triumphant friends, kind words of greeting Rama sends. Blessed for thy sake, O spouse most true, my deadly foe I met and slew. Mine eyes are strangers yet to sleep. I built a bridge athwart the deep, and crossed the sea to Lanka's shore, to keep the mighty oath I swore. Now, gentle love, thy cares dispel, and weep no more, for all is well. Fear not in RAV, a letter 1E47's house to stay, for good VIBHISH, a letter 1E47 now bears sway. For constant truth and friendship known, regard his palace as thine own. He greets thee thus thy heart to cheer, and urged by love will soon be here. Then flushed with joy the lady's cheek. Her eyes o'erflowed, her voice was weak, but struggling with her sobs she broke her silence thus, and faintly spoke. So fast the flood of rapture came, my trembling tongue no words could frame. Ne'er have I heard in days of bliss a tale that gave such joy as this. More precious far than gems and gold the message, which thy lips have told. His reverent hands the Vanar raised, and thus the lady's answer praised. Sweet are the words, O queen, which thou true to thy lord hast spoken now, better than gems and pearls of price, yea, or the throne of paradise. But lady, ere I leave this place, grant me, I pray, a single grace. Permit me, and this vengeful hand shall slay thy guards, this Raksha's band, whose cruel insult, threat, and scorn thy gentle soul too long has borne. Thus, stern of mood, Hanuman cried, the Maithil lady thus replied. Nay, be not wroth with servants, they when monarchs bid must needs obey. And, vassals of their lords, fulfill each fancy of their sovereign will. To mine own sins the blame impute, for as we sow we reap the fruit. The tyrants will these dames obeyed, when their fierce threats my soul dismayed. She ceased, with admiration moved the Vanar chief her words approved. Thy speech, he cried, is worthy one whom love has linked to Raghu's son. Now speak, O queen, that I may know thy pleasure, for to him I go. The Vanar ceased, then Janak's child made answer as she sweetly smiled. My first, my only wish can be, O chief, my loving lord to see. Again the Vanar envoy spoke, and with his words new rapture woke. Queen, ere this sun shall cease to shine, thy Rama's eyes shall look in thine. Again the lord of Raghu's race shall turn to thee his moonbright face. His faithful brother shall thou see, and every friend who fought for thee, and greet once more thy king restored like Sachi, 1014, to her heavenly lord. To Raghu's son his steps he bent, and told the message that she sent.